Hello Samscon, this is Obamamaniac responding to your video asking about religion. I'm a Christian, particularly Catholic Christian. I'm a theological moderate, and I would specifically like to address the point you made in your video about how during the event you attended that some of the speakers said that unless you give up everything that gives you joy in life, that you'll burn in hell. I'm going to share with you the story of how the first Buddha reached enlightenment, and I know some of the more conservative Christians here are probably going to say something like, well, this is a Buddhist story. You say you're a Christian. You'll rot in hell for such blasphemy. Well, in my opinion, Buddhism is really more of a philosophy than a religion, in large part because of its adherents do not worship Buddha as a god, but respect him as a great teacher, at least for the most part. And the first Buddha never claimed he was God, but well, if you want to go into more detail about that, I'll have to make another video about that. But anyway, that little detail out of the way, it's time for the story. There was once a young prince named Siddhartha Gautama. It was prophesied that Siddhartha would either become a great king that would rule the masses or a great prophet. His father, the king, did not want Siddhartha to become a prophet, so he tried to shield him from all spiritual teachings and human suffering by confining him to the palace and providing him a wife and every material possession he could possibly want. At the age of 29, Siddhartha Gautama went outside the palace walls to meet his subjects, despite his father's attempts to remove the sick, the aged, and suffering from Siddhartha's view. He saw an old man and was disturbed at what he saw. Anyway, he went on further trips outside the palace and later saw a diseased man, a rotting corpse, and on his last trip, an ascetic, and was horrified at these sights as well. Siddhartha then realized that material pleasure was not all that there was to life, so he escaped from the palace, never to return, and began living his life as an ascetic monk. He deprived himself of all luxuries and nearly all food and drink, and practiced self-mutilation. After nearly starving to death, he then realized that extreme self-deprivation was not the answer either. Siddhartha Gautama got something to eat and then decided that he would meditate under a tree, I believe it's called the Bodhi tree, until he knew the truth. 40-something days later, Gautama received enlightenment and became known as the Buddha, or the Enlightened One, and started preaching what he called the Middle Way, which is a middle ground to what he rightfully regarded as the two extremes of the opulence of his life as a prince and the extreme deprivation of his life as an ascetic. I told this story because in our own individual spiritual quests, we, like Siddhartha Gautama, are all faced with the false choice between two extremes. The first extreme is this watered-down nihilism advanced by popular culture called moral relativism, where you can do whatever you want regardless of the consequences to yourself or others, because if it feels good, do it. An example of this is the movie Brokeback Mountain, which should really be called Humpback Mountain. But joking aside, it is a movie about two married cowboys who meet on a sheep herding job and have a secret 20-year sexual relationship behind their wives' backs. Now, some gay groups and some people on the extreme left have made excuses for this horrendous film by saying or implying that the affair of the main characters is acceptable because they were in love. Now, I'm not arguing against homosexuality because, in all honesty, my view on whether or not it is wrong is fairly agnostic. I I am arguing, though, against adultery, which is a form of betrayal which does great emotional harm to the spouse who has been cheated on. The second extreme is religious fundamentalism, which has manifested itself in America in the form of the religious right. The religious right is so excessively narrow and legalistic in their approach to spiritual matters that they have completely missed the point of what spirituality is all about. An example of this is the letters section in the letters in the religion section of my local newspaper, which appears without fail every Friday for as long as I can remember. Reading this section, nearly every letter talks about whether or not you can be a good Christian and still believe in evolution. Now, from a scientific standpoint, this is very important, but from a spiritual standpoint is completely irrelevant. By using creationism as an arbitrary litmus test for sincere Christian belief, the religious right is unnecessarily dividing Christians. Anyway, before I end this video, my advice to you is to avoid the extremes which I've described and to keep searching and questioning